past month, I'm sure most of you have noticed, I've been putting up statuses. Hey! Giving a different fact every day about Tourette's. Yesterday I put out a status asking people to ask me questions, things that they maybe hadn't got answered throughout the month when I was giving out facts, and maybe things they were curious about. I want to start off this video by covering the basics of what actually Tourette syndrome is. Tourette syndrome is a neurological disorder which is characterized by tics. Tics are sudden repetitive movements, bastards, or sounds that someone can't control. For a diagnosis of Tourette's, a person has to meet 4 criteria. The first part of that criteria is that the tics need to be 2 motor tics, which are tics, bastards, which involve movement, which could be eye blinking, eye rolling, face twitches, neck twisting, bastards, basically anything that involves a movement, so you need to have 2 of those. On top of having at least 2 motor tics, you need to have at least 1 phonic tic. Bastards. A phonic tic is a tic which makes noise. Now noise could be a whistle, could be clicking, it could be stammering, stuttering, could actually be words as well, or phrases. Some of which could be the involuntary swearing, which is so often focused on with Tourette's, which actually is only about 5 to 10% of people with Tourette's. So the second criteria that someone needs to meet for a diagnosis of Tourette's is that the tics need to last for longer than 1 year. The third criteria that someone needs to meet for a diagnosis of Tourette syndrome is that the tics wax and wane. What that means is that on some days the tics will be maybe quite severe, they'll be very frequent. On some days they'll be actually quite mild and barely noticeable. Now, but with this criteria, there can be no break lasting longer than 3 months. Fourth criteria for a diagnosis of Tourette syndrome is that it had to have onset before the age of 18. Now that doesn't mean that the person has to have had all these together before the age of 18. What that means is that there has to be at least some evidence of incidence of tics before the age of 18. What can happen with some people, bastards, fuck off slut, is that they can not meet all those criteria but still have quite prominent tics and quite disruptive tics. What happens there is that person normally will be diagnosed with a tic disorder. That doesn't mean that the person won't face the same challenges that a lot of people with Tourette's do, and it doesn't mean that maybe it might actually sometimes be more disabling than those with Tourette's. Each person with a tic disorder or Tourette's needs to be judged on their own merit. I want to get down to the questions that I was asked on Facebook, and also on Twitter actually. The first question that I want to address was, how would someone get an assessment for Tourette's, and are there less obvious signs to look out for? How someone would go about getting an assessment Tourette's would be, first point of contact would be your GP. You'll go to your GP, you'll basically describe the symptoms. It's a good idea normally to keep a diary, bastards, of when they started, times when they're worse, and just other kind of, as much evidence as you can have to say that how long this has been going on for, and how severe it is, what tics there are, and what's present. What a GP then will tend to do is a GP will refer on to a neurologist or a psychiatrist, both of which can diagnose Tourette syndrome or tic disorders. The less obvious signs to look out for, I think when looking for Tourette's, there's no less obvious signs. I think that the tics are the main thing, and the frequency and the duration of those tics are basically bastards in terms of a diagnosis of what's going to give you that diagnosis. It'd also be a good idea to actually note if there's any kind of like tendencies associated with OCD, any kind of ADHD, or anything else that's been previously diagnosed. Other diagnoses which are quite cunts, which can actually come hand in hand with Tourette syndrome or sometimes autism spectrum disorders. So if there's any evidence of those, well then that would give kind of that would kind of be signs to look out for, that people may have tics in those certain conditions. Another question I've been asked is, if someone of any given age develops Tourette's, what would I advise them and their family? What I would say first of all is that it's not really a diagnosis cats to be afraid of. Tourette's on its own doesn't normally cause very many problems. It's normally things that come along with Tourette's, like anxiety, maybe the OCD or ADHD, that can cause problems, particularly at school. There can be problems as well where family members aren't quite convinced on whether the problems associated with Tourette's, like OCD or ADHD, anxiety, whether they're behavioural or whether they're actually out of the child's control. But what I would say is Tourette's normally has a very good prognosis. Most people will actually remit of their symptoms by the time they enter adulthood, and even if you don't, it's something you can overcome. Cats, I've found that although it has changed my life a lot, and pretty drastically at the beginning, it was devastating, you can get past that and you can still lead a normal, happy life just like everyone else. The next question is the biggest hurdles I've faced and how I've overcome them. I think the biggest hurdles I've faced myself were at the initial part, when I first started to tic, and when I first realised that my body was doing things that I couldn't control, and it was me trying to reconcile the fact that I had no control over this, and me finally accepting that yes, this is out of my control, was the first biggest hurdle I had to overcome. The second biggest hurdle then was trying to convince everyone else, bastards, and try and let everyone else see that actually this was out of my control, that I was really trying my hardest, and no matter what I did, I couldn't stop this. And then the third biggest hurdle was then society, and how to face society like this. Bastards, where I'm involuntary swearing, where I have movements I can't control, where I'm making loud noises I can't control, where I'm making people jump, I'm scaring people. And that in itself was a really big hurdle, which I suppose leads on to the next question, which was how I cope every day with everyday life and getting out into society. To be honest, it took me about 6 months between the onset of my symptoms and probably actually from when my symptoms were their most worst, until I could actually go out in public on my own, and without actually having a plan. Bastards. At the beginning, I wouldn't go to the shop on my own. I didn't even want to go to the local corner shop near my home. Bastards. I didn't want to go out in restaurants for something to eat, which I still find tricky. Bastards. I didn't want to go out with my friends, so I would have arranged to have a taxi pick me up at home if I was meeting friends, go directly to theirs and stay with them, and then have the taxi bring me back. Or if I was going out with friends, I'd go to a bar, I would sit with them. If I felt uncomfortable, I would leave at the first point. So it took a lot of kind of testing my anxiety, seeing what I was comfortable with, and persisting with myself, and forcing myself into situations I felt uncomfortable with. Bastards. Before I could actually overcome the anxiety. Also, it took a lot of bastards, cunts, go fuck yourself, you're a slut, you're a dirty wee slut, camera. Sorry. It took a lot of me accepting that people will stare, people will look, and trying to actually just put the blinkers on so that I couldn't see what was going on around me. So when I am having a really bad day with tics, I've learned to just filter out everyone else and filter out other people on the street and not pay attention if someone's staring or someone nudges their friend. And it took me a long while to do that, because I was generally an outgoing person before my tics, so it took a while for me to get used to not looking around to see my friends or see if I knew anyone, or just to filter out the background, which people don't generally tend to do. Do I prefer if people ignore or interact with my tics? This is a tricky one. It depends on my mood a lot of the time. If I'm in a really good mood, then generally if anyone makes a joke, I'm okay with it. But what I tend to say is that if you don't have experience of Tourette's yourself, don't make jokes about it, because someone who has experience of Tourette's has lived that life. Someone lives that pain that Tourette's brings, including the physical pain with tics, the anxiety. Someone who lives that experience can make those jokes because they've suffered as well with their Tourette's, and so they can make light of it. Someone who hasn't been through that, I don't feel has any right to do that. If I laugh, then I think that's normally a cue that someone else is okay to laugh. It's got to a point though where most of my friends know me well. They know my regular tics. Hey fuckers, and they're not that bothered by them, so they don't even register them most of the time, which is strange. Another question included in that was, is there anything else that increases or decreases my tics, apart from alcohol? Funnily enough, alcohol doesn't really affect everyone with Tourette's the same way, so some people it makes it worse, some people it makes their tics better. Another one's coffee, for example. Coffee for me sends my tics through the roof. Being in a really good mood makes my tics really bad for some reason. Feeling giddy makes them really bad. I've noticed when I wake up first thing in the morning, they tend to be quite subdued. For example, when I'm at uni and then after I've had lunch, they tend to be worse in the afternoon. Yeah, after work, so after a period of suppressing, they can get worse as well. So yeah, those are kind of the main ones. The next couple questions are about education on Tourette's. First one is, are there any good tips for anxiety in exams? What I would say, somebody who is of school age going through exams, that GCSEs and A-levels are not the most important thing in your life. The most important thing is your health and your mental health. Don't let exams compromise your physical or mental health. You can always do exams at a later age. Don't feel like this is the most important thing you will ever have to do, because there are loads of people who are successful without having to face exams. If, however, you are stressing out about exams, a good thing would be to make sure that you're very well prepared, make sure that you're doing a lot of revision, make sure that you're actually putting in the work. A lot of the ways of achieving well is that you put in the work, and that would be my advice really. What is the best thing and the hardest thing about being a university student with Tourette's? Hey! The hardest thing was going to university and actually meeting new people that I didn't know, and being afraid that people would judge me, on my tics and not actually take the time to get to know me. I was really afraid as well that, given the course that I'm doing mental health nursing, I thought, that I wouldn't even be considered for the course because I would be working with vulnerable people, and maybe my tics might have been a barrier to that. What I would say is my tics make me understand people who are marginalised a lot better. I would also say that my experience working with other people with Tourette's and meeting other people with Tourette's has given me such a wider understanding of OCD and ADHD and autism spectrum disorders, which you do need a good understanding of when you're a mental health nurse. So that, I suppose it's kind of a bit of both there. The The best thing about university, hey, with Tourette's is, and I suppose about college as well, whenever people are on your side, they're really on your side. Hey, bastards. I had one incident where a lecturer had told me to stop my tics and said I was a disruption, where I was really glad. Hey, bastards. Cunts, cunts, fucking cunts everywhere. I'm gay, help me. There was about 5 or 6 other members of my class spoke up and said, actually no, he's not a distraction. And they'd said that they would have walked out if I had actually left the class. So that was really good. My final question is, if I had a tablet to take away my Tourette's, would I? I don't think I would. I mean, wow, it's really enriched my life, and it's given me such a deeper compassion for people. It's given me such a better understanding of disabilities. Hey! Not only that, because I do have kind of the coprolalia, at times I make myself laugh. At times my Tourette's can be inappropriate but appropriate. And I think it was like Brad Cohen, who's like, he's this teacher, primary school teacher with Tourette's, which is fantastic. He said that like his Tourette's is like his constant companion, which is really true, because it's there when you're really upset, and it can probably make you more upset. It's there when you're really, really happy. It can make you really just completely die laughing. Hey! So I don't think I would get rid of it, because it's just part of who I am, and I like who I am. I'm not going to change that for anyone.